Okay, and welcome back, amazing students, and thank you for joining me for part two of our lecture, Combating Ableism and discussing diverse abilities in particular. I'd like to engage us in some more immersive activities today to place ourselves temporarily in the shoes of individuals who may experience a diverse ability cognitively. And then what I'm going to be able to do is I wanted to be able to share some of my experiences as a social worker serving individuals with diverse abilities, particularly members of the deaf community, as well as individuals with autism. These are two areas that I had the pleasure of working with um, throughout my career, and came to better understand a lot more about myself and others with diverse abilities in the process. Couple of disclaimers before we dive into the activities. I do want us to have fun while we're learning. I do want us to be able to share new experiences and to see the world differently, right? But I also want to make sure that we're doing that respectfully, and that we're not doing this at the expense, right, of others. And so these activities, therefore, are designed to take us out of our comfort zones. Um, you're welcome to participate, right? But you don't have to at any point if you feel uncomfortable. Participation for these activities is solely attributed to contribution to the discussion. So I'm not going to assign points for any of this, right? You may feel a little like what's sometimes defined as funny, or you may want to laugh or joke, but just be aware that, individuals who your family, your friends, or even your classmates may experience these diverse abilities or even personally connect with the content. So I try not to allow us to really take these activities lightly or in jest, right? Like, let's laugh, you can giggle during them, that's fine. But let's also consider, though, that there may be a personal connection, right, to some of this. So let's dive in the next slides into some activities. I look forward to doing these with you so we might be able to learn a little bit more and have a discussion from my own experiences regarding serving individuals with diverse abilities. In this next slide, what I'm going to ask you to do is go ahead and count the total number of F's that you see in this sentence. I'm going to limit the amount of time that you have to read the sentence, obviously, in order to simulate this particular diverse ability. But I'd like you to go ahead and read and keep track of the number of F's in this sentence. And then what you will do is keep track of how many you counted, and I will reveal the answer to you. Okay, as stated before, you have a limited number of time to go ahead and count the number of F's in this sentence. Please go ahead and do that. I'm going to give you about 10 seconds, and then I'm going to change the screen, and stay with me and I'll explain. So go ahead and start reading. Okay, so I know that that was a short period of time, and again, my apologies. However, the point of that was to simulate a particular diverse ability regarding a cognitive hiccup, if you will, that occurs in individuals who are in the process of reading. So here's what you're going to do. You have that number of F's that you counted, hopefully. Take a mental note of that, and I will go ahead and give you the answer to this particular riddle here, right? So how many did you find? I hope you found maybe 6. Some of you may have found less, right? Definitely hope you didn't find more. And here I've highlighted in red where all the F's were in this particular set of words, right? If you notice, the words were designed, right, to be broken up in order to better simulate this particular exercise. So how many F's did you count, right? Did you miss any? And what feelings or thoughts might you experience when taking a test, reading a syllabus, writing a paper where you tend to have a difficult time completing sentences and reading them in their entirely? This simulates a cognitive diverse ability in which the brain skips over information as it's reading. And as it's skipping over information that you are physically seeing, you are therefore missing the information that you are processing and learning. And so consider this is a particular diverse ability that does not present itself with any physical traits. You may be sitting next to a classmate that may have this diverse ability that we don't know, right? And so what we have to be careful about is assuming, right, when we talked about those microaggressions last week regarding individuals with diverse abilities, that they should speed up and catch up to the rest of the group, or that they're making things worse than they actually are, unless we have lived our lives, right? Attempting to move forward in our studies with such a cognitive disability as this, we really have no way of fully understanding that experience, right? But we certainly can be empathetic to the individual who is experiencing that, right? So, normally here I would do another activity where we dive into content related to what it's like to experience life being hard of hearing or deaf entirely. What I'm going to do though is talk about a little bit about my experiences serving individuals of the deaf community. So while I was doing my initial casework as a social worker, I had several cases in which we served individuals who were deaf or hard of hearing, who also spoke ASL, American Sign Language. And so they signed during the meetings, and we had an interpreter that would interpret between ASL and those who were of the hearing community. Okay. And so during that time, it was extremely educational for me, and I came to truly appreciate the, how do I say it, the resiliency, the perseverance. I just loved the positive spirit and attitude, the strength of the deaf community and those that I worked with. And they were so patient with me and taught me a few notions of etiquette in working with individuals with diverse abilities related to hearing, right? And so here's some things that I learned that I think would be very helpful for us to understand when interacting with individuals with this particular diverse ability. The term deaf and dumb is an older term and considered an insult in the deaf community. That's how we used to refer to individuals of the deaf community. We use the term now deaf and mute. Okay, mute is a scientific and socially accepted term to describe an individual who is deaf and also therefore has difficulty speaking. It's important to maintain eye contact with the individual you are communicating with who may be deaf or hard of hearing. The reason for that is because many individuals who are deaf and hard of hearing have also learned to read lips. And so reading eye contact is also a part of reading lips, and where you are also picking up on facial affect and expressions. And so that is equally important. It's also a sign of respect too, to look someone in the eye who speaks ASL when you're communicating with them. It's in order to gain an individual's attention, you may calmly wave at the person's field of vision. Frantic waving indicates something's wrong. So if you just need to get the attention of an individual with a who's deaf or hard of hearing, a gentle, calm wave, all right, is important. Okay. You don't want to grab or poke a deaf person from behind to get their attention. This is also a common signal that something could be wrong, that there's an emergency. Okay. If you're out for a meal with a deaf person, you don't have to order for them. They are accustomed to pointing and communicating what they would like from the menu, right? So sometimes making that assumption, remember, it's going back to making an assumption that you want to help, also infers that they are incapable, an individual is incapable of doing certain things themselves when they've acclimated to that aspect of their life just fine. You never want to initiate a conversation about how a deaf person lost their hearing. It implies you don't view the person as whole, rather incomplete or inferior, right? They are the sum of the fact that they are deaf or hard of hearing. Individuals who you establish trust with and a genuine relationship with may choose to share the circumstances of their diverse ability with you, how they became deaf or hard of hearing. And if they don't, if they're not comfortable with that, it's not up to us to ask, right? Think about it in the context of like diabetes, right? I don't particularly want someone always coming up to me and saying, "Hey, did you get diabetes because you're fat and you eat too much, or did you get diabetes because it was genetic or in your, in your parents on both sides of your parents or whatever the case is." Right? How we see someone and interact with them says a lot about how we view them and also how we might treat them, right? When you're communicating with a deaf person, don't stand with the bright light or sun behind you, because obviously it's making that notion of lip reading more difficult, and obviously maintaining eye contact. So just something to be aware of when communicating, right? And when you give a presentation, and I would have simulated this in class, you don't want to turn the lights off in the room if there's an individual who's deaf or hard of hearing in the room. And the reason why you don't want to do that again is because it's difficult to read lips. It's considered disrespectful, right? Because an individual who is deaf or hard of hearing is dependent upon some of those other factors, like being able to see what we're communicating with facial aspect and lip movement in order to assist in making the most of the content that we're delivering. And so this is a sign of respect as well as appreciation for the fact that we recognize that diverse ability, and we want to be better, right, about communicating our information to those individuals. In the next slide, we'll dive into some content related to working with individuals of another diverse ability, which I've had experience and some of the most amazing moments in my career serving. Okay, and as we move towards the beginning of the end of our presentation for today, one of the things that I wanted to discuss in our lesson are some of the experiences I had serving individuals with autism. So throughout my career in the past 15 years, one of the things that I've truly enjoyed doing is serving kiddos with autism. There are three things. Well, there's many things that I've learned in serving individuals with autism, but there's three things in particular that I found most interesting personally in my time serving these young men and women that I wanted to pass along to you to further sort of illustrate the amazingness. When I say diverse ability, I really do mean diverse as in different and not less than, because I have seen where serving individuals with autism has enriched my life personally, professionally, and spiritually simply by the amazing piece of who these individuals are. So, one of the things I want to do is I want to share these three things with you, and I want to do it telling you a story of three individuals that I worked with, individuals with autism that profoundly changed the way that I saw the world. There was one kiddo that I worked with. He was a little bit older, about 15 years old. And this individual here, my job was a behavioral specialist who went out and picked up kiddos who were diagnosed with autism from their homes in order to take them out and socialize those individuals in public settings. So the idea was that individuals with autism, okay, might at times be hypersensitive to loud noises, crowds, a lot of movement, and things like this. Now, kiddos with autism can be in a broad range of functioning on a large spectrum. Some individuals may have autism and be considered what is deemed as lower functioning, where they may not have the ability to speak, or let's say there's also incontinence or enuresis involved, and so those individuals may wear diapers and things like that too. Where you can have individuals who are considered higher functioning with autism who speak, who engage in conversations, who can go out in social settings, but also may have difficulty picking up on social cues, things that you and I would interpret as sort of tells in a conversation. So this particular kiddo that I first met with, let's call him Matthew. Okay. Matthew in particular was an older kiddo, 15, 16 years old, lower functioning. So he wore a diaper. And that diaper, needed to be changed and things from time to time when we were out. Um, was coming from a single parent household. Mom had a lot on her plate, and this also provided mom an opportunity to take care of herself emotionally and mentally, right, with this break that was provided. So I would take Matthew out, and we would go out with other groups of behavioral specialists and kiddos with autism. And we would go to eat, or we would go walk at the park, go bowling, things like this. Matthew, as I said, was nonverbal, so he could not speak as well. Matthew loved pizza, loved him some pizza. One day I went to go pick up Matthew from mom. Mom said to me, and this was new when I first started working with her. All right, said, have you ever been out, with other kiddos before? Remember, she's concerned for her son. She wants to know if I know what I'm doing. And I said, yes, ma'am. I've had the opportunity to take out a few other kids. And she said, okay. She said, I'm wondering, today's Friday and Matthew loves pizza. Maybe if you guys can, maybe you could take him out for pizza, and he loves Coke. And I said, okay. So we went to this place in Riverside. I won't disclose where. Nice place in Riverside that sold pizza and sodas. And we went and ordered pizza. I was with a group of about 3 other behavioral specialists and 3 other kiddos. And we're sitting and we're eating our pizza, and we order a Coke for Matthew because he likes Coke. And Matthew downs a couple of pieces of pizza and absolutely just blows through the soda, like chugs the soda. Like I'm talking about if you've ever seen the movie Elf and you see Will Ferrell's character just chug all of that soda. Well, Matthew did that. And when I use the analogy that Matthew burped, to the same degree, with the same conviction as Will Ferrell in the movie Elf, then that would have been an understatement. If there was any way for me to describe that more, it would have been. So Matthew, at the end of his meal, lets out this loud, super loud burp to the point where everyone almost in the restaurant hears. A few tables within us hear and turn around, and Matthew smiles in sort of this nice, satisfied smile, looks up and says the F word in a long, drawn out phrase. And I'm not going to say it here on the recording, but F, okay? If you can picture the F word said just like that. So a long burp and then F. This was Matthew expressing that he loved his meal and he enjoyed it. Now, I did not know that Matthew did this after eating pizza and drinking a Coca Cola. And so everyone around in the table had a good laugh. I was mortified. Matthew was laughing, and everyone at our table was laughing. Later on that day, I took Matthew home, and the mom saw me. She must have seen the look on my face, and she just starts laughing hysterically. And she said, "Did Matthew get his pizza and his Coke?" And I said, "Yes, he did. I have a feeling you knew that Matthew would do that." And she laughed and said, "Yeah." She said, "Look, I just wanted to break you in a little bit. I wanted you to know who my son was, and if you could stick with him, with that, you can stick with him through anything." And I said, "Okay, that's awesome, and thank you for trusting me with your son." One of the things that I came to later learn was Matthew didn't eat a lot of pizza or Coke. That was a rare treat for him. And the reason for that is because there is some research that states that diets that are high in gluten, so sugar and grains and things like this in particular, can have a negative impact on a kiddo with autism's behavior. And so in particular, that can make the behavior a little more, some of the symptoms a little more exaggerated. Symptoms of feeling uncomfortable out in public and things like that can be difficult. And so what's really important, one of the things I learned is diet and routine is essential for a kiddo with autism or even an adult with autism. Having the right diet, a healthy diet involved with a steady routine of what to expect is very important. If I missed Matthew's pickup even by 5 minutes, all right, that can throw Matthew into a fit because he's not sure quite what's happening at that point, and he would worry excessively and even have outbursts in his behavior. So it's important to understand that if you're working with kiddos with autism, you must always stick to that behavior or that routine, and you must always be on time. Another thing that I worked with, let's hear this other kid here. Let's call this kid Casey. Casey was high functioning kiddo with autism, so very high functioning. Spoke intelligently, eloquently. You might even have difficulty initially picking up on the fact that Casey was a kiddo with autism. Casey loved paintballing. Well, let me put it this way. He loved discussing everything related to paintballing. He loved reading about paintballing. He loved watching paintballing tournaments on television. He was infatuated with it. And this is common for kiddos with autism, that they will become obsessed with a particular topic: paintballing, fishing, arts, space, whatever the case is. And they will want to talk about it literally 24/7, to the point where when they're speaking about it, all right, they won't even pick up on the social cues that you are dying with boredom because you have no more interest in hearing about it. They'll just continue on with it. That's part of kiddos with autism and some of their behaviors. Well, what happened was is that Casey always wanted to go paintballing. He wanted to go over and over. And me and another behavioral specialist would go and try to pick up Casey from his place on weekends. And on Saturday, we would plan it during the week and say, "Casey, let's go paintballing on Saturday." He would say, "Okay, sounds great." We'd pick him up. We'd be ready to go. And Casey would have extreme anxiety. He would be throwing up. He would be nervous. He would become agitated. At times, he would become angry. He would even become verbally aggressive, yelling and screaming at us to go away because he didn't want to go. part of kiddos with autism is that they may also have severe social anxiety about going out into large places. So just because of the fact that they're obsessed with something doesn't mean that they necessarily want to do it. Part of my job was to help desensitize Casey to the point where he could be able to do some of these things that he finds interesting in life in order to live a more fulfilling life. And so one of the things that we did was, after about 4 attempts to go pick him up on a Saturday, and Casey just wouldn't go, right? We tried to get him shopping for gear. We thought that would help. Still nothing. So one day we said, look, we're not going to do it. Let's just go to breakfast. What's a place that you like? And he's like, I like McDonald's. And we're like, okay, we're going to take you to McDonald's. What we didn't tell him is that we were going to take him to a McDonald's located on Camp Pendleton's Marine Corps base, because they have a McDonald's there and they also have an amazing paintball center. And so what we did was, me and our behavioral specialist picked him up, and we drove all the way from Orange County, in Orange County, down by Anaheim, okay, all the way to Camp Pendleton, right, near the ocean, right, the Marine Corps base. And we entered the Marine Corps base, and he says, what are we doing here? This looks like a military base. I said, yeah, but there's a McDonald's here. We're going to take you to McDonald's. And I wasn't lying. We took him to McDonald's. And then afterwards, what we said was, we're going to stop and swing by this place. And so we turn, and you make a quick turn onto this little dirt road, and you end up on this massive paintball structure, this park. And Casey sees, people playing paintball, and they're having a blast, and he gets all excited. And then when he gets out of the car and he realizes that we're going to do this, he says, I don't know if I want to do this. I don't know. I'm scared. I'm worried. And I said, well, look, we're not going to play a game today. Why don't we just go and rent some of the paintball guns and shoot some targets, right? And so he says, okay, I could try that. So we got the paintball guns, we rented them, we're shooting the targets, he's having a blast, he's actually liking it, right? And so I said, why don't we try to go, play a game? And he's like, well, I don't know, I'm not sure if I'm into the games, I get nervous, it might hurt when I get hit and all this kind of stuff. And he's giving me excuse after excuse, and we're being nice, we're like, why don't we just try it? No, I'm not sure, it could hurt. And so then at that point, he's talking about it. Now, keep in mind, before I say this, I've been working with Casey for a long time. He and I have gotten to know one another. We have a tight relationship, okay? Casey's going on and on about being fearful of getting hit with a paintball. And so I just shoot him. I just shoot him right in the stomach with a paintball. And he yells and he says, ow, and he throws his gun down. What are you doing, Antonio? And he's all upset. And I said, did it hurt? And he said, yeah. I said, are you alive? And he said, yeah. I said, shoot me back. So he shot me, and he got me good in the stomach. And I won't lie, it really did hurt. I kind of felt bad for him after that. But then I said, so can we go play paintball now? And he had this big old smile on his face and said, let's do it. And we went out there, the behavioral specialist and I, with Casey. We played all day paintball against all kinds of Marines, and we got annihilated and blasted with paintballs. And it was some of the most fun I had ever had. And at the end of the day, Casey came back home and told his mom what an amazing time that he had had. Sometimes with our kiddos, we have to build a relationship with them with autism to get them to a place where they can truly take risks, right? Safe risks. But it's based on a relationship that they have with them. And that was one of the most fun times I had ever had working as a social worker, with these kiddos. Last one, and I won't spend a lot of time on this, unique cognitive gifts and abilities. Oh my gosh, some of these kids absolutely amaze me with the diverse ability that they bring, the sheer genius in some respect, right? I've never fully understood, but I've wanted to appreciate on such a deep level the cognitive abilities that some of our kiddos have with autism. This particular kid was also nonverbal. He could only say a few words that he had learned. At a very young age, this kiddo, in order to stay calm, his mom would put on a video for him, and she would pop in a movie. And so some of those movies were like specials and stuff like that on HBO. And so HBO would come up on the screen, and the old sound, I don't know if you know the old logo and the sound, but it would come up on the screen. And so this particular kid knew, let's call him Justin, knew that every time this movie came on, he would be entertained and he would be excited. So because Justin was nonverbal, he couldn't put a sentence together asking to watch a movie. But what he wanted to do when he wanted to watch a movie is he would say, and he would stand in the middle of the room, grab his mom by the arm, pull her over to the TV, and start saying HBO, HBO. And if you can hear me clapping, that's what he would do. So Justin would stand in the middle of the room and go HBO, H, and he would dance back and forth, and and if his mom said, well, let's do something else, or let's try and do something else, he would literally pull her by the arm, bring her back to the television, and HBO over and over, right? This particular kid, though, it was amazing to see. So this particular kid, some might say, well, their cognitive abilities are delayed. There's nothing going on up there. Unfortunately, those folks were extremely wrong. So here's another fascinating thing about some of the gifts that these individuals received. This kid would wake up in the middle of the night and organize the entire house while his mom was sleeping. And I'm not kidding. What he would literally do is wake up, organize all the cups, all the plates, all the Tupperware, everything in the house, everything in its perfect place in some sense, either by size, by color, whatever the case is. And the house would be amazingly organized the next morning. Now, if you try to move anything in the house, that was a whole nother issue. The kid become verbally and physically aggressive. Okay. But this notion of doing that, right? Also in the middle of the night, Justin liked to order things on the computer. That's correct. This kid who was nonverbal learned how to sign into his mom's eBay account. He would shop for things that he thought were cool and he would click buy. And when he bought those things, what would happen is that he knew that they would come in the mail, but he didn't have a concept of time. And so right after Justin hit click to buy, he would want to run to the mailbox, even opening the door without anyone knowing, running to the mailbox to see if his order had come. And so this particular kiddo, we had to change the computer passwords and everything on the in the house in order for him to not be able to order online whenever he wanted. And so that's just another story about the unique cognitive gifts of these individuals. Truly some of the most amazing and best times that I have worked in my life serving individuals with autism. Now, notice I say that they're not autistic. These are not autistic kids. These were kiddos with autism. And that's different, right? Honoring the dignity of that individual. They're kids first, and they happen to be kids with autism. They are not autism. And then they're just a young autistic person, right? So anyway, I hope you found that stories interesting, and we'll go ahead and continue with the next bit of our lecture and close out for today. Okay, as we wind down today's lesson, some of you may be thinking to yourself, Dr. Mako, thank you for sharing all that information. And you may be also wondering, so what does it have to do with me, right? And ultimately, I'm a big fan of asking us to put ourselves in someone else's shoes, right? So take all the information that you learned today, take all of the amazing, inspirational brilliance of kiddos with autism, take all of the integrity, the pride, the perseverance of working with individuals who may be deaf or hard of hearing. Think about the lessons that Natty and Dylan shared with you about what it means to live their lives with a diverse ability. And let's think about this. Let's reflect on this in our own lives, right? What is it like, right? Consider what living 24/7 with one of these diverse abilities could look like, right? Think about what it's like to be in class when you're trying to find a seat. You're going shopping at the mall, or you want to try on clothing, right? You're going out to dinner, you're making dinner reservations requiring space for a wheelchair or crutches. Going to the movies, thinking about seat availability, parking, restroom accessibility, planning a vacation, factoring in other stairs, activities, dietary needs. And then think about that's all just logistics, right? That's how to do it. Then think about what it does to us. What emotional impact might individuals feel as a result of these challenges? What behaviors might an individual show when managing these challenges? So yeah, if someone with a diverse ability at some point snaps at me, there's probably a good reason why. Right? Maybe I've done something insensitive and I need to be aware and schooled on that. But maybe it's just because they're tired for a minute. They're tired of dealing with all of this, right? And they just need a break, or they need someone to empathize with them. They need someone to just say, I'm so sorry you're dealing with that. I'm so glad you told me. Maybe what they need is grace, right? So just wanted to let you know another way of looking at life, right, through someone else's eyes. On the next slide, I want to close this out with an amazing message, one from one of my favorite people ever. And then we will close out our lesson for today. Finally, one of the things that I want to do is close us out with an amazing video that I hope that you truly connect with and that tugs on your heartstrings a little bit here, right? What I'm ultimately asking us to do is view our diverse abilities as blessings, right, rather than burdens. To honor that just because someone is different doesn't mean that they're less than. They're really just different, right? And we're all different. Um, One thing to consider also is the scripture verse from Romans. And you've heard me throughout the term reference this scripture. For as in one body we have many parts, and all the parts do not have the same function. So we, though many, are one body in Christ and individually parts of one another. Since we have gifts that differ according to the grace given to us, let us exercise them, right? I mean, look at the Bible's talking about diversibility, right? Since we have gifts that differ according to the grace given to us, let us exercise them. Let's use them, right? Some people would look at these three kiddos that I worked with and they'd say they're less than. They're never going to accomplish anything. They can't do what I can do. And I would argue that those kids have done something more significant in my life than many other professionals had for me, right? They literally led me to look at the world and experience it in a different way. And I'm so grateful for that. Another thing I'm grateful for is Fred Rogers. So there are three people that have influenced my life heavily in terms of my development and my upbringing. One was Jesus, of course, in that order. Second was Martin Luther King Jr. Reverend King profoundly impacted the way that I saw the world and experienced it. Third was Fred Rogers. Many of you have grown up at some point being exposed to Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. Fred Rogers, there's a lot of rumors floating around on the internet about him and his origins. A lot of people said, well, did you know that Fred Rogers was like a Navy SEAL, sniper in Vietnam, and he racked up all these kills? And other people are like, there's no way that Fred Rogers was like that outside of the show. He was just putting on an act. Well, that's not the case. Everyone that met Fred Rogers said that he was the kindest, gentlest person that they had ever met. Fred Rogers, something you may not know, was also deeply spiritual. Christian and deeply connected with his faith. And Fred Rogers had a passion for children. Fred Rogers' show talked about a lot of things that are difficult at times for us to think about talking about children, to children with. Fred Rogers' show aired right at the peak of the Vietnam War. He discussed war, he discussed divorce, he even discussed diverse abilities. In this particular video clip that I want to show you and leave you with today, it's a clip that was done of a famous scene that was filmed between this kiddo Jeff here with a diverse ability and Fred Rogers. Jeff grew up a fan of Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, asked if he could go to the show. He was there, and while he was there, Fred Rogers brought him out and introduced himself and had a conversation with him. And the song that you're going to see is a famous song sung on the show, but also it's called It's You I Like. And also, what's beautiful about it is this was improv. This wasn't scripted. This was just an amazing, beautiful moment between Fred Rogers and this kiddo. So what I'd like you to do is watch this scene. Watch what it means to be empathetic to someone, to honor their diverse ability, to empower them to have a voice, right? And at the end of the song, I'll share just a couple of brief thoughts related to this video. I'd like you to enjoy that. Well, I hope you found that video certainly as heart-touching as I did, right? Just absolutely just a beautiful video and an exemplary example, how about that, right? Exemplary of the type of person that Fred Rogers was, but also the resiliency, right? That we're talking about, the inspiration that came from Jeff and his story. Jeff was so brave and candid about talking about his diverse ability. And what Fred Rogers did was provided a platform, as Dylan discussed, for someone to be a role model who actually has that diverse ability to be in front of others. One, as a role model for diverse ability, but the second, as a child, right? Fred Rogers' show was watched by children all over the world. And so Fred Rogers gave Jeff an opportunity to educate others about his diverse ability as a child, to empower other children to be able to have this conversation and see another child in a wheelchair from a different perspective. Just an absolute beautiful moment. So what I want to leave you with before the end of this is, if you ever want to personally check out more about who Fred Rogers was, you already know the movie It's a Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood was released, and there's some other great movies that are out there. There's a book that you can check out in which the movie was based on, and it's called I'm Proud of You by Tim Madigan. That's the name of the book. One of my favorite books of all time. Not too long, actually, either. It's a nice short read. The book I'm Proud of You actually follows this man, Tim Madigan, who was, just like in the movie, was called to conduct an interview with Fred Rogers for a magazine. And Tim's relationship with his father was rough, wasn't great. And to Tim, this was just another job. So he went, And in the process of conducting the interview, he ended up developing a very deep relationship with Fred Rogers. And it is the story of his relationship with Fred Rogers up until Fred Rogers' passing. And so, if you're ever interested in learning more about the type of person that Fred Rogers was, I'd like to share that with you. But I thought that's just a really special moment regarding ableism, right? And so, at this point, we'll go ahead and close out for today's lecture, and we'll move into the next slide for our centering exercise.
Jeff was going to have spinal fusion and be in what they call a halo,
Cast, a halo
metal
cast.
rim, and then cast on his shoulders and bolted
All the way down his trunk.
And, yeah,
We
he may
weren't
not
sure.
have survived the surgery. And so we said, what would you like to do? This is going to be a really big task for you, and so we want to kick it off with something that would be really special.
Mr. Rogers?
Hey, Jeff. I'm glad to see you.
Hi.
Thank you very much for coming by. Can you tell my friends what it is that made you need this wheelchair?
Sure. Well, when I was about 7 months old, I had a tumor, and it broke the nerves to tell my hands and legs what to do.
I see.
And I got a wheelchair when I was 4 years old.
That was your first one when you were 4.
Uh-huh.
He told Jeff before they started that they would have a chat and then sing a song together.
I think he said we might sing a song. I
Yeah,
remember because
yeah.
I was sort of surprised. What, he's going to start singing a song? Well, this is totally not even what song.
It's you I like. It's not the things you wear. It's not the way you do your hair. But it's you I like. The way you are right now. The way down deep inside you. Not the things that
hide you.
Not your fancy chair. That's just beside you. But it's you I like. Every part of you. Your skin, your eyes, your feelings. Whether old or new. I hope that you'll remember, even when you're feeling blue, that it's you I like, it's you yourself, it's you, it's you I like. And it is you I like, Jeff.
Thanks.
And there must be times when you do feel blue.
Uh-huh.
I'm not feeling blue right now, though.
Me neither.
I'm so glad that you came today.
Thanks.
I remember asking one of the staff people that was there, well, what do you think? Did it go okay? So, don't. This is good. This is good.
He had his surgery, he survived. Certainly Mr. Rogers had an impact on who Jeff became, his sense of self.
And so for our closing activity today, what I would like to do is go ahead and center on this scripture verse coming from Ephesians, and be kind to one another, compassionate, forgiving one another as God has forgiven you in Christ. And let's make our focus word for today kindness, right? So I truly hope you can see kindness was manifested in Fred Rogers in his just uncanny ability to appreciate everyone for who they are, right? To like them for who they are. And imagine the power that if all of us had a little bit of Fred Rogers within us and that kindness that he showed, what this world could look like with a little more of that floating around, right? So let's go ahead and make sure our hands and feet are in a nice comfortable position. Let's take that nice deep breath and let's draw into what God is saying, right? About being kind to one another, being compassionate and forgiving, right? And what does kindness mean in our hearts as God is calling us to be kind to one another? So go ahead and take that nice deep breath, and I will keep track of the time. Okay, go ahead and take that nice deep breath and come on back. I want to say thank you so much for joining the lesson today. Again, you can do it. We believe in you, right? You're going to make it to the end. I want to say thank you so much for tuning in, for being such great sports when it comes to the content. Um, Please be sure to check Blackboard for your assignments and due dates. If you have any questions, know that I'm here. I will respond to you. I will get back to you and we can connect. And know that you are always in my prayers. All right. If there's anything that you need, I'm here. I'm praying for you. I appreciate it. Thank you so much. Hope you enjoyed the lesson, and I will talk to you next time.